flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of business is mayoral comments and a resolution of appreciation for retiring firefighter and paramedic David A. Anderson. It's been a long time. Whereas David A. Anderson has been a dedicated employee of the City of Lake Forest since August the 12th, 1996, and whereas David A. Anderson will honorably retire from the city on May the 18th, 2018, and whereas David Anderson served in the following positions during his dedicated career: firefighter, paramedic, pension board member, shift training officer, safety committee, and Lake County SRT team member. In addition, David A. Anderson received numerous accommodations and letters of gratitude for outstanding service throughout his career. Whereas David Anderson will be sincerely missed by his friends and co-workers, now therefore it be resolved by the City Council of the City of Lake Forest that the Council, on behalf of the administration and residents of the community, hereby expresses its appreciation and gratitude to David A. Anderson for a public service faithfully performed. And be it further resolved that this resolution will be appropriately inscribed and conveyed to David A. Anderson, with a copy to be included in the official minutes of the May 7th, 2018 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
David, come forward, please.
Yeah.
Jeez. Was that day one?
Yeah, I guess so.
Betty, don't cross that 78 anymore.
Dave, I think everybody's commenting you haven't aged a day in 20 years.
Holy
So.
Christ, honest to God.
It's like a mug shot.
That's what I said.
All right, well, that's it for the awards. The fire department has a lot of celebrating to do, I think. So, on to Chiefs, or wherever you're going.
Hope it's Chiefs.
Second item is remarks by myself pertaining to recent meetings with IDOT and Metra and Lake County partners. First is a meeting with IDOT officials on April the 20th, 2018. And first, a little background. In May 2017, the City Council approved Hanson Associates to value, engineer, and redesign the proposed pedestrian underpass at the Telegraph Road Station due to the original cost estimate of some $13 million, dictated by Metra's requirement that the track not be closed during construction. The cost of the previous engineering study was funded by a federal high-speed rail grant and an Illinois Jobs Now grant, and therefore we needed to amend the agreements with IDOT to design an underpass estimated to be 65% to 70% of that $13 million. The necessary paperwork was submitted in July of 2017, and no re-engineering work or costs could occur until we received a notice to proceed from IDOT. To be clear, since City Council approved moving forward 1 year ago, no work or expenditure of funds has occurred on the pedestrian underpass project. Following repeated inquiries, including assistance from State Senator Julie Morrison, a meeting was scheduled with IDOT officials to learn the reasons for the delay in approving the amended agreements. On April 20th, myself, the city manager, the city's superintendent of engineering, Bob Ells, and Jim Messmore of Hanson Engineering, along with Emily Carey of Lake County Department of Transportation, met with Beth McCluskey, Justine Sidello, and Aaron Olivan of IDOT to discuss the engineering consulting agreement between Hanson and the city and IDOT. The original grant agreement from 2010 was for $1 million, and approximately $600,000 is still available for the Hanson Phase 1 redesign of the project. The amended agreements had been reviewed and approved by IDOT staff in Springfield last year, but had not been executed by the Secretary of IDOT. Two issues became abundantly clear during that meeting. IDOT was very frustrated with the characterization of the proposed third track as a holding track, as they see the long-term need for a continuous third track from Rondout to Chicago, and indicated that they plan to articulate their position in a public meeting that will be held following the release of the final EA. It was also evident that their frustration spilled over to other parties associated with the EA process, including the City of Lake Forest for our recent resolution opposing the third track. During our meeting, the IDOT officials explained their 50 to 100 year vision for supporting a third track. The city was given the opportunity to express its concern with the proposed project, which we did early and often in the meeting. Both sides support enhanced commuter rail options, but where our paths are not aligned is with respect to freight traffic. As one might imagine, IDOT has a different perspective with respect to the movement of freight around the Chicago region as part of an overall state transportation policy than we do here in Lake Forest. I must emphasize, since it has been alleged by various groups, including the Action Group, that at no time during our meeting did any representative of IDOT ever state that they would only provide the remaining grant money in support for an Amtrak stop on the condition that the city support IDOT's long-term vision for the third track. This is just a false and inflammatory speculation. Number two, this brings us to the second issue, funding. During the course of our meeting, IDOT reported the Illinois Jobs Now grant monies should not have been used for engineering planning studies. Now keep in mind, this is after 8 years and $400,000 already authorized by IDOT for such work, that their position is now changed, which prompted a long discussion on where we go from here. How do we find the $281,000 of funds to complete the Phase 1 design work of the less costly project by Hanson for this pedestrian underpass, so that federal funding for the construction of the underpass can be pursued? Both IDOT and the city agree that this is an important public safety project and supported by all parties associated with the Milwaukee District line: IDOT, Metra, Amtrak, Canadian Pacific, and the City of Lake Forest. We left the meeting with the understanding that IDOT staff was going to brief the Secretary of Transportation, Randy Blankenhorn, and get back to us on possible approaches to funding the $281,000. While it is only my opinion, I came away from that meeting with a strong feeling that IDOT has a much bigger funding issue than the Lake Forest pedestrian underpass project. Keep in mind that the state of Illinois has not passed a capital bill since 2008, 10 years ago. And I truly believe that they do not have the resources to fund needed capital projects. We have a similar challenge here in Lake Forest, but not anywhere near the magnitude of the problem at the state level. Another perspective on this is by examining Metra's capital budgets in recent years, is that Metra has received effectively $0 from IDOT. In fact, $265 million meant to have been paid in the last several years has not been paid and is a source of continuing problems for Metra. On May 2nd, I and the city manager met with Lake County partners and some area employers, along with Metra officials and a half dozen large Lake County employers, to discuss a universal crossover switch project that would directly address the southbound service gap on the Milwaukee District line between 430 in the afternoon and 7:30 p.m. in the evening. This is a major issue for area employers in the retention and attraction of employees in the years to come. During this meeting, Metro was very open to modifications to the existing train schedule in order to better serve the employers in Lake County in meeting the needs of today's employee. Frankly, it was exciting and encouraging to see Lake County, Metro, the city, and area employers sitting down and discussing a vision for the future of public transportation in our region with enormous specificity of specific actions that can be taken near term, and a future that we all agree needs to be molded by public-private partnerships as funding for capital projects is becoming more and more scarce. No dollar commitments have been asked or made, but all parties recognize that we all have some skin in the game to make a universal crossover switch happen. I will continue to keep the City Council and the community informed of our progress and would like to extend gratitude to Lake County partners for taking the lead on this strategic issue that will benefit Lake Forest and Lake County for many generations. That concludes my remarks. Comments by the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have two items tonight to report on. Number one, if Mike Strong or Susan Banks could activate, no offense to Dave Anderson, we'll take his picture down. But the city council knows that 1 year ago, actually 1 year ago today, City Council adopted the strategic plan for the city of Lake Forest. And we periodically update the community on where we stand with action items that were set forth in the strategic plan. So Mike's going to share with us where residents can go to find updates. This is updated a couple times a year. And for those of you that participated in the last strategic plan, you know that about halfway through the 5-year period of time, we will reconvene everybody and sort of talk about where we are, what we accomplished, what we have left to do, are we on the right track, and so forth. But there's a location, there's a matrix on the website that Mike is going to go to now that anybody can go to and get sort of an up-to-date as to where we stand with those different items. So, Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Quickly here, the strategic plan is listed in the residence section of the city's website under Lake Forest Life. There's a strategic plan link here, so for those watching at home, can get to it that way. We've also done a friendly URL. Add strategic plan there at the end, and what we've done is added the scorecards for each of the priority areas. So you can hover around that. So for fiscal stewardship, it will pull up a PDF that shows the current scorecard updated for FY19 on that page, which is tracking all the projects that have been identified or are identified in the plan. So each of the 6 has a current scorecard. We welcome you to take a look. Provide any comments, and we have included an email link at the bottom of the page for any residents or other individuals that may have questions or comments regarding the plan and its form. Just a reminder too, there is a link on here to the actual plan document. So if you'd like to view the existing document, you can do so by clicking on that.
Thanks, Mike. The second item is it's my pleasure to deliver in front of all these people the huge check to the mayor for his service to the community over the past year.
Oh my gosh. It is true. I paid the princely sum, I can't believe this, of $10 a year, which has an interesting historical origin from our 1861 charter, and it's been seen fit never to change it. And so I will promptly go to the bank, this is Lake Forest Bank and Trust, go with my 4 grandchildren, turn it into cash, and go to an ice cream shop and partially pay for the cost of ice cream
Deficit spending.
in very partial recompense for all the time this job has taken from my grandchildren. But thank you very much.
Thank you. And that concludes my
I
report
didn't
for
know
this
there
evening.
really was a check.
Well, let me go next before finance.
Okay. Next is comments by council members, and at the request of Alderman Reisenberg, we're going to do a quick
Jump ahead of finance.
jump ahead to Personnel Compensation Administration Committee to be presented by Deshay Kalmar
But me first.
with Jack Reisenberg, member of the Personnel Compensation Administration Committee, to deliver a report of the committee's meeting today.
Yeah, thanks. It's not going to be a long report, and Deshay is going to be given the regular report later on in the agenda. However, I wanted to mention that the PCA, Personal Compensation and Administration Committee, met earlier this evening and determined that the city manager's contract has not been changed, is not subject to renewal, and has been removed from this evening's agenda. That is the conclusion of my report.
All right, so I think what we'll do is go back to regular order. Thank you. To the Finance Committee, which is, and the approval of the comprehensive fiscal plan for 2019, presented by James Morris, Finance Committee Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple comments, and Director Holub is going to carry the bulk of the burden for us tonight on a very complicated product that she's been working on diligently for months. Just a note of well done, I think, to the city manager and Director Holub and the staff, because this year our budget's $84 million, and it is a 13% reduction in the budget from last year, which is remarkable. And it is due to the careful planning, I think, on the part of the city staff in terms of the budget, the impact fees, and the charges that are in the from a capital standpoint that we've saved. So it's remarkable. I will say that it's important to note that that probably won't continue, because we need to pay attention to our infrastructure. So as we go forward, that's probably not going to be a repeat performance, but so far so good this year. So look for more capital spending in the future as long as we can balance the budget. City staff prepared a document that's 200 pages long, very detailed. It took months to put together, and the staff has been very diligent in that, so well done. And now I'm going to turn it over to Director Holub to go through an overview of the budget and see what questions the City Council might have.
Thank you, Chairman Morris. I am occasionally asked why comprehensive fiscal plan? Why do we refer to that instead of the budget? The primary reason is that while the document that you're asked to approve this evening does include the annual budget for fiscal year 2019, it does include other very important financial data such as long-term financial forecasts, information on the 5-year capital improvement program, and other pay plan and personnel related information. So that's the primary reason we use comprehensive fiscal plan as a term rather than the budget. So the action taken this evening essentially culminates about 9 months of work. This chart just depicts the financial cycle for the city. The city's fiscal year is May 1 to April 30th. So the first few months of the fiscal year, the summer months, are spent closing out the prior fiscal year, preparing for audit, having the independent audit firm come and review the city's books. And then about September, we begin the budget process for the ensuing fiscal year. We start out reviewing the fiscal policies and developing the capital improvement program, and then we turn to look at the revenue side and look at tax levy, fees, and charges for review. The City Council Finance Committee holds its first of 2 budget workshops in November of each year, and at that workshop we concentrate on the capital improvement program and revenues with significant discussion on the tax levy. The tax levy is then approved in December, which is the primary revenue source for the budget and therefore allows staff to begin to develop target budgets for each operating department. The operating departments prepare their budgets in January. They're reviewed by the city manager in February. And then the second budget workshop is held in March, at which the City Council Finance Committee considers and discusses the operating budget. We make any changes, final changes in late March and April, put the document together, and have the budget book out for you to review prior to approval the first meeting in May. A few of the very high-level highlights, as Chairman Morris mentioned, the total fiscal year 19 budget is $84.16 million. That does reflect a $12.6 million or 13% decrease compared to the estimated actual in FY18. And much of that, as Chairman Morris noted, is capital related. Despite that, the FY19 capital program still does include $9.6 million in capital initiatives. The water plant and system improvements are budgeted at about $3.8 million to complete the 2-year project. The majority of those expenses occurred in FY18. It includes $750,000 for improvements to North Beach Access Road, $1.5 million in street and sidewalk improvements, $100,000 in tree replacement and EAB program expenses, and park improvements of $400,000. So despite the reduction, there is still a sizable capital budget included in FY19. Looking at revenues, I would just note, they're somewhat difficult to read on these slides, but just as a reminder, in October of last year, the city launched its financial transparency portion of the city's website. It is powered by a software application called OpenGov. And so the charts and graphs that you're seeing in this presentation are created through OpenGov, and I would just note that residents have the ability to get on the city's website, go to financial transparency, and use the OpenGov application to look for financial information related to the city. This chart specifically looks at the FY19 revenues overview, and as you can see, 48% of the total revenues come from property taxes and other taxes. And the chart below just shows a comparison between the FY18 estimated actual and the FY19 preliminary budget for your review and approval this evening. As you can see, much of the difference between 18 and 19 occurred in other financing sources. In the other financing sources category, and that related to a bond issue in 18 of over $9 million, and transfers between funds to support capital improvements in FY18. So total revenue estimated for FY19 is $84.5 million. OpenGov allows the ability to drill down in a particular component. So the next slide just shows a drill down into the property taxes and other taxes category. You can see that is predominantly made up of property tax revenues at 79% of that group. You can see that sales and use taxes are about 7% at $2.7 million. And then other taxes of $5.7 million are detailed in the chart below and are made up of real estate transfer tax, utility taxes, and other small taxes. Turning now to the FY19 expenditures overview, as noted, the total estimated expenses for FY19 are $84.16 million. You can see from the graph that salaries and benefits combine citywide on a citywide budget level to account for 48%. So personnel represents 48% of the total city costs in FY19. What's important to note is that the general fund is the primary operating fund of the city. It's about $33 million of the total 84. The general fund is where the majority of employees are budgeted, and the general fund budget is made up of 71% personnel. But here you can see that the changing percentage when capital improvements, debt service, and other expenses are taken into account. When looking at FY18 estimated actual to FY19 budget, you can see there that the difference is capital outlay. The significant change is capital outlay going from $21.5 million in 18 to $9.4 million in 2019. This is a pie chart. It shows the same $84.16 million, but instead it's separated by department, so you can see the departmental impact of the total citywide budget. Public Works at $14.2 million is the highest at 17%, followed by Police of $10.4 million at 12.4%, and then Parks and Recreation and Fire. You'll also note that non-departmental accounts for 26.4% of the expenses. These are expense types that aren't specific to a particular department. So again, using OpenGov, we can drill down to the non-departmental section and see what the non-departmental 26% is made up of. The majority of that is $8 million in insurance costs. That's both medical and dental insurance for employees, as well as liability, workers' comp, and auto insurance for the city as a whole. Interfund transfers out are important to note because they're not actual outflows of resources. They are transfers in between city funds, and so they aren't truly expenditures in the sense of the word. And then you can see the other capital outlay is $4.6 million, debt service at $2.8 million, and then you can see other smaller pieces of the non-departmental expenditures. As I noted, the document before you this evening for approval is more than an annual budget. As part of the budget process, the city engages in long-term financial forecasting for its primary funds. This is the 5-year forecast for the general fund. You can see the actual results for FY17, the projected results for FY18, the year we just completed, the projected for FY19, and then the forecast for years 20 through 23. The very positive aspect of the 5-year forecast this year is that this is all, the net before CIP is positive. One thing that the city has been challenged with the last few years is seeing this go negative in about the third or fourth year of the 5-year forecast. But I think changes that have been made in the budget, some significant decisions benefiting the city in the long term, have allowed that deficit period to push out beyond 5 years. We do a 10-year forecast for the general fund. This is just a graphical representation of the 10-year forecast. The solid blue line is the projected revenues based on the budget and the forecast. But we also do alternative scenario discussions where we look at the potential implications of decisions made in Springfield on the city's budget. So the dotted line, for example, was a scenario that was discussed during the budget process that would be the outcome on the city's revenues of a 2-year property tax freeze and further reductions in income tax distributions from what the state has done in FY18. We can then depict that and show that against the projected expenses, which are red, to forecast the period at which the expenses cross the revenue line and would require additional cuts to balance the budget. I did want to bring up just 2 other items related to long-term financial planning, which I think has made a significant difference for the city. This is the 5-year fund balance forecast for the Capital Improvement Fund. The Capital Improvement Fund is a general fund that funds many of the capital improvements from revenue sources that are shared. So this is where a lot of decisions have to be made each year in prioritizing projects against others. And what I've done is highlighted in yellow this line here that was property tax levy. Prior to FY18, there was no property tax levy going into the Capital Improvement Fund. And the city used the proceeds of the sale of the property at Laurel and Western to advance pay general obligation bonds that were outstanding, and instead replace that debt service line item with a pay-as-you-go line item in the Capital Improvement Fund, increasing the ongoing revenue sources available each year to fund capital improvements. So that has been a significant benefit to the 5-year capital improvement program. The second relates to public safety pension costs. The council has spent a lot of time talking about public safety pensions and how to fund them over the last year to year and a half. The chart at the top shows the actual experience of fire and police pension obligations from fiscal year 05 to fiscal year 16. These are actual funding requirements, and you can see how those increased over time. But of more concern was the fact that this cost was increasing to the city by 8 to 9% per year and projected to continue to increase until 2040, which is the current statutory deadline for funding. Through several discussions at the city council level, several workshops that were conducted, and then development of a pension subcommittee that worked with the city's independent actuary, the city council discussed and approved some significant changes in how they fund public safety pension costs going forward. I would note that for the FY19 budget, it did involve an increase of $800,000 to the budget to increase police and fire pension contributions. But the important aspect of that is that it should turn the ramp. It should allow us, basically paying off a mortgage early. And allowing us to avoid in the future these significant ramp up of expenses and get a handle on that, that growing obligation. This slide is a slide that is intended to depict costs of city services to an average household. It's an average household of an $800,000 home. And it shows what the property tax levy portion is for 15 through 18 and projected for 19. And then below that, the additional fees and charges that are applicable to an average household. We highlight in yellow the changes for FY19. So the property tax levy was adjusted, water rates were adjusted, and the public safety pension fee was increased from $10 to $20 per quarter. For fiscal year 19 to help offset the costs of those public safety pension costs. In summary, the city's current financial condition is excellent. The city enjoys very healthy fund balance reserves. The city has had a AAA bond rating, the highest rating available to a local municipality for a number of years, but the AAA bond rating was affirmed most recently last year in 2017. Lake Forest residents enjoy the lowest property tax rate in Lake County, and this budget is a balanced budget funded from ongoing revenues. Long-term financial challenges have not changed for the last few years. They remain the state budget situation and the potential impact it could have on the city's budget, and the fact that expense growth is continuing to outpace revenue growth, primarily due to personnel costs. So our recommendation is approval of the FY19 Comprehensive Fiscal Plan, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the Alderman? Alderman Moreno?
Thank you. Phenomenal work. Really nice job,
Thanks.
everyone. You really did a great job, as always. I'm struggling a bit with our claim of the lowest property taxes because I do see the other taxes and other fees increasing. And so I wonder what our standing would be relative to our neighbors if we fully loaded our property tax load for all of the other fees and taxes that we impose, and how we compare on that basis, because I know we're not the only one that charges other fees. Do you have any sense of that?
I don't. It would be probably interesting to analyze because I know utility taxes are very common. Vehicle stickers are one thing that has gone, some communities have moved away from vehicle stickers and just put it on their tax levy. We know that the public safety pension fee is unique, but I think most of the charges and fees that the city imposes are similar to those of surrounding communities.
I will go on record that I do favor the pension fee. I'm glad we're doing this, and kudos to everyone that it was on the committee that worked on that. I think that's a great thing to do.
I know you don't, so rare these days in public finance to see the cost curve bent down, but through the complex set of assumptions and inputs and so forth, we were able to determine a path that works, I think, quite well for the city for the foreseeable future, while at the same time promoting intergenerational equity. And in the worst case, leaving this behind for somebody else to deal with. We're not doing that in Lake Forest. So, thank you.
Can I go down and we'll just come back around this way? So Alderman Bushman will come around this direction.
Thank you. Again, my compliments for all your hard effort and excellent work that you've done. You did such a great job. I don't know if I can answer the question that I asked of Alderman Morris earlier today, but I would like to confirm on the record. is there anything in the budget or the comprehensive plan that relates to the funding for the pedestrian underpass at the West train station?
I've talked to the city manager on that very point, so I'm
Okay.
going to ask him
Oh,
to
take
comment
any answer
on where we
that,
stand
you
on
give
the
us.
grant funding and reimbursement on that particular issue.
Well, and I will ask Elizabeth to correct me if I misstate anything, but as the mayor indicated earlier this evening, the underpass project of $281,000 is part of our, I think we call it number 5 capital program, in that it's funded by outside agencies. We have to, under any grants, state, federal grants, we have to pay initially, and then we are reimbursed after the fact. So in this case, as he reported, until we get the green light from IDOT, that project is not going forward, and we will have no expenditure until such time as that happens. But we have a placeholder in there because we do have funds going out and funds coming in. So I hope that answered it correctly.
Yeah, and I would just note that from a budget perspective, it was included in the FY18 estimated actuals for both revenue and expense. It is not in the budget document for 19. It will be on your rollover requests in July. So that would be an item that would be separately identified on the rollover requests that come to you as part of the appropriation ordinance. So hopefully we'll have more information by then to know for sure.
Recognizing this new development that IDOT or the state is taking the stance that the funding is not going to come from the fund that or the grant money that we were expecting, which says it's in limbo or unknown at this stage. Is there anything we can or should be doing at this time to confirm that we will get reimbursed for those funds, or is it something that the city's going to have to eat?
Well, I think you're mixing, the 281 has not been expended, so there's no
I thought
exposure.
Hanson was doing engineering work for
No,
us.
they've been on hold since the council approved the contract with Hanson in May of 17.
Okay.
We submitted the paperwork in July, and it's actually been sitting in IDOT since then. So there have
Okay.
been no expenditures whatsoever from Hanson.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Reisenberg, any questions over there?
No, I'm
No? Alderman Tack?
My only comment is that when I started 6 years ago, these revenue expense lines crossed next year. I thought it was perfect timing that I would be leaving. But actually what it reflects is that we literally spent the last 6 years, twisting all the details and getting this to the point where now it's not even on, the 5-year forecast. So I think that reflects, for those who think that the city council doesn't do much, I would request that you take a look at that. A tremendous amount of work and effort went into that, and every dollar that we spend, we look at very critically. So I think we did good work.
We'll come back to the mayor at the end, but Alderman Newman?
No questions.
Alderman Rummel?
I just had a question on the graph that Alderman Tack was referring to. Have we taken a look at the increased EAV lately? I think that it's been more robust than we might have anticipated when we originally did that graph. And so I'm wondering if there might be even better news if we were to be a little more optimistic about our EAV assumptions.
I mean, the earnings on, because right now our model is based on a 7% earnings. We're actually talking about taking it down.
Talking about your equalized assessed valuation.
Oh, that, okay. I'll let,
What will happen, Alderman Rummel, is if the equalized assessed valuation grows by more than we project, it just lowers the rate. And so it doesn't result in additional revenue to the city because the city levies a dollar amount, and then the county calculates the rate by dividing that amount by the EAV. So what we tend to find is that in rising EAV periods, the rate will fall, and then as EAVs tend to, when they fall, then the rate just goes up. So it tends to neutralize any changes.
okay, just to follow up on my point about the earnings, because Alderman Newman and I have talked about this. We're trying to create a very conservative actuarial model for our pension fund. So it's right now showing average 7% earnings in our portfolio, which in the past couple of years has been okay, but who knows if that'll return. So we're going to try and work that down to 6% going forward, given that we flattened out the curve that we saw on the graph. So.
I just wanted to follow up on Alderman Moreno's comments. Were you expecting some follow-up from Director Holub and her department on that? I mean, some additional detail on what other costs so that we could at least have a kind of a general benchmarking with all in versus other cities? Was that your intention?
My expectation is that we would do that at the next go-round.
At some point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
no immediate follow-up.
Good. I think that would be, I just wanted to second that. I think that would be a good idea without having a sense of enormous urgency about it, but I think it would be just.
Thank you.
We're pretty good about being straightforward about things, and I have to say, and I think the mayor's going to let me puff a little about Welcome Home Again in a couple of minutes, but we really feel strongly that however we represent ourselves, we don't have to say things that aren't true, because we think there's a lot of good stuff that is true, but we certainly want to get that right, because that's anything that relates to math, somebody is always going to check you on, and so we just want to be sure that's right. So
It's a pretty good story. I had a chance this week to look at a homeowner's tax bill in Waukegan, all up versus us. Wow. Wow. It's a much better deal here. Any other comments from council?
I would just make one comment, and that's the award that we get annually for our budget presentation from the Governmental Financial Officers Association. Well done. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Is there any comment from the public in the audience with regard to this question, the approval of the comprehensive fiscal plan? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and ask for a motion to approve the comprehensive fiscal plan for fiscal year 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, still part of the Finance Committee, is the annual vendor approval to be presented by Elizabeth Holub, City's Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor Lansing. A code revision in 2011 set forth a process by which vendors providing services throughout the year could be approved by the City Council as part of the budget for the year in estimated amounts as provided in the list that was in your packet on pages 17 and 18. Any individual project that vendor does that is over $20,000 still requires City Council approval specifically, but anything under $20,000 could accumulate over time to be more than $20,000 over the year. So we have typically provided you a history, so you have the vendors and their approval for fiscal years 12 through 18, but the highlighted column is the one recommended and requested for approval for FY19.
I want to just point out, Alderman Moreno asked many months ago if we could make sure that the vendor list included vendors who might be paid partially month over month or quarter over quarter that in the end would end up over $20,000. And so with a lot of work and effort, but surprisingly difficult to do because different departments could be spending with the same vendor not necessarily knowing that. So the finance department's worked on that. They've come up with this list. And then they've had to balance that. If we approve it, we still want not sole source vendors, we want competitive bids. So they're trying to marry competitive bidding with this approval of vendors. And I think they've made a pretty good effort at getting that done.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? If not, any comments from the audience on this matter of annual vendor approval? If not, I'll ask for a motion for approval of the attached list of vendors for fiscal year 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Next item of business is the Personnel Compensation Administration Committee report to be presented by Deshay Kalmar, the Director of Human Resources for the city.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I would ordinarily be coming asking you to approve our personnel policies as the agenda states. But earlier this evening, the PCA committee did vote and asked me to pull those and take a look at something in a little more further detail. So I will be coming back to you at your first meeting in June with the policies for approval. However, I would still request that you approve our pay plan. That's important for our employees. The pay plan was in your budget materials, and the ranges have been adjusted per the meeting in March with 2.5% range adjustments for the majority of positions. There have been a few positions that have adjusted a little bit higher because we were falling beyond competitive in some of them. So that's what we have before you, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? This is all part of that multi-month review that we undertake each year at the council. Is there any comment from the audience concerning the city's fiscal year 2019 pay plan? If not, I'll ask for a motion for approval of the City of Lake Forest fiscal year 2019 pay plan.
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Public Works Committee, consideration of an ordinance amending Section 135-108C titled General Noise of the City Code. First reading.
What you've all been waiting for.
I think I started this, didn't I?
Yes, somebody made the mistake of turning on a leaf blower and waking this person up, and that's how these things happen. Chuck Myers is going to help me with this. On April 11th, 2018, the Public Works Committee considered amendments relating to the use of gasoline-powered leaf blowers and other types of lawn maintenance equipment. Committee's recommendation is presented to the City Council for consideration, and if desired by the City Council, approval of first reading of an ordinance amending Section 135-108C, and Chuck will describe the proposal.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Lansing and members of the council. Real quickly, if this goes forward. Yeah, there we go. So I just wanted to remind everyone, the current ordinance that we have does list some restrictions on leaf blowers and lawn maintenance equipment. It's all lumped together. We've talked about this a little bit before, but there are hours that we have restrictions on it currently. And again, a reminder on the decibel levels. We talked about this in the past too. We typically see the older gas-powered ones in that 80, 90, 100 decibel range. But a lot of the newer models that are quieter, some of those fall down into that 60, this is going to be a little annoying, sorry it's not advancing, but in that 60 to 70 range. And also some of the electric or battery powered ones fall into that as well. So the Public Works Committee and staff discussed these options at the last meeting. So we looked at taking no action at all, education, training initiatives. We'd probably look at doing that through our licensing program, and we would give guidelines for landscapers and homeowners alike. And then the third one was to regulate decibel levels. This is something that is very difficult for us to mandate. The enforcement is difficult. I have seen it in some communities, but usually it's difficult. You can do it through the licensing program, but we talked about that a little as well. And again, the goal there is to get it down to at least that 65 to 70 range, which is still fairly loud, but it's a lot better than some of the old annoying leaf blowers. And then the fourth option was the city code revision for the hours of operations, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And then the final option was a partial year ban, which is typically, in most communities that do this, May 15th to September 30th. So, and then the rest of the year would remain as it is now. So those were the options. This led to a discussion about what you see on the screen. On the left, you can see our current hours, and that does apply to all lawn maintenance equipment, including mowers, gas-powered, electric, whatever. All of those are in there. On the right is the recommendation from the Public Works Committee. It was thought that we didn't need to go with a full or partial ban at this point, that we would want to try this approach. And you can see we've simplified the hours allowed. So Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sundays and holidays, we would not allow gas-powered blowers. And you can see the note on the bottom, this applies to gas-powered leaf blowers only, not to the other lawn maintenance equipment. So people would be able to mow their grass on a Sunday if they would desire. This was what the consensus of the committee was. We talked about this quite a bit with city staff, and you have the recommendation for the amendments in your packet. So with that, any questions? This is the first reading tonight. We would have to come back to you after discussion.
I have a question. Would this restrict other forms of blowing hot air after 5 o'clock?
A little more specific? Yeah.
Somebody's on his way out.
Yeah, his retirement. At the concern of incurring Alderman Tack's wrath with my questions, did you guys look at putting together programs for like landscapers? It's my recollection that Mariani, for instance, is going totally electric in what, maybe perhaps 1 to 3 years or whatever. Should it be a goal for all landscapers by some 5 years, 3 years to be totally converting over to electric versus gas? But we couldn't insist that individual homeowners do that, certainly. I mean, there'd be no way to police it, and I wouldn't want to put together any kind of regulations on that. But it seems to me it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at the industry and then, without putting together financial hardship for them, putting together a program.
We have looked at that, and that was that education and training aspect of this that we talked about. So the thought was to provide landscapers with information like that. As a matter of fact, the dialogue that's about to come out, we have an article in there, and it's all about leaf blower courtesy. So that's just one small step toward that, but we could certainly encourage that and educate on other options. And you brought up Mariani. We are using Mariani for our contract at Forest Park currently, just starting this year. So Forest Park, the upper level, will be done with all electric mowers, blowers, string trimmers, everything. And also the college in Lake Forest, they are doing the same thing with Mariani as well. So companies are starting to offer that more. I would imagine that this will continue to grow, and we can continue to encourage that.
It's important to know, though, electric isn't necessarily quieter, and measured in a decibel level. It's a different sound, it's a different pitch, but it's not necessarily quieter. So the benefit there is theoretically environmental, but not so much, auditory.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to note, too, that these times in and of themselves would probably be an incentive to most landscapers, because a lot of them want to be operating 7:30 to 9 and not start after 9 on weekdays. So I think there's an incentive to switch over to electric-powered, already embedded in this policy. And certainly the 5 p.m. stop is, another incentive.
We did reach out to a number of landscapers, local landscapers, and talk to them about some of these changes. They all favored changing the hours over a ban, obviously. They would rather go that route. But one of them actually recommended that we make it 9 o'clock, because they said that most of the complaints that they receive are when they have blowers going prior to that. So they're very open to this. They're used to it in other communities. This restriction they're okay with. So, and they are trying to do more to be environmentally friendly, but also to be quieter.
What about, I don't see a lot of details here about enforcement or violations. What can you offer in that area?
We talked about that, and actually we had Chief of Police was at our Public Works Committee. We talked to him. So the two areas that get the most complaints would be the police department and also community development. Police department had stated in the meeting that they really don't get that many calls. Very few calls over the last few years even that they've had to respond to. So it doesn't appear to be something that a lot of people are complaining about these days. So I don't know that I have a better answer than that, but what we've heard, community development does on occasion get someone complaining about a neighbor, but it's not that frequent.
I would add, and Chuck, I know this is outside of your purview and outside of Public Works, but I do think that it's instructive for us as a city to think about noise generally in other areas of our activities, including community development. And I know we do that, but I wonder if we wouldn't like to think about that as a little bit more stridently as we move forward for the benefit of all of our ears.
Thank you. I guess having started this, as I rather predicted to myself, this would be complicated and be not so simple. But we had some of the finest minds, Randy Tack, Chuck Myers, and others on it.
Boy.
And yes, while I think there's some of the newer technologies, 4-stroke gasoline engines, and some of these battery-powered blowers are really helpful. It's not so simple. I have to tell you, in this sort of year of sensitivity to the issue of driving around neighborhoods, the single loudest leaf blower I came across was something that it was a bright red 1989 looking Sears Craftsman leaf blower that was plugged into a wall, so it had like a 100-foot cord, and it was incredulous. I was incredulous at how loud this thing was. It was just made to drive people out of the neighborhood. So I think this is a good step, and as we do with a lot of things, we'll see how it works, and so forth. So is there any comment from the audience with regard to this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and ask for a motion to grant first reading of an ordinance amending section 135-108C entitled Noise Generally of the City Code.
So moved.
So moved, or second.
And there is a second. Yes, there is a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rommel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Speak up.
Alderman
Last meeting,
Reisenberg?
by the way. Can tell. Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. I believe Alderman Beidler has another
you.
comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quick, and don't laugh when you hear me say that. So, you know that it's my pleasure to be serving on the city's marketing committee, and I think many of you, certainly in the audience and hopefully at home, and I know up here, my fellow aldermen know all about the Welcome Home campaign, and I never get tired of talking about it. One of the great pleasures has been, and I referenced this earlier, the sort of ongoing growing list of all the reasons that people like living in Lake Forest, and people talk to me about this all the time, so it's great. Right now, I want to talk to you about something that's come in your mailbox recently that is not officially any relationship to Welcome Home. One piece is the Chamber of Commerce 2018 Community Guide. Looks like this, and it's absolutely packed with wonderful stuff. It will open, you know, kind of like Psalms. It opens to, but in this case, it's the map of the city, which is always a good thing to have on hand. Even people who've lived here for a long time, like me, can periodically need to have some help. It's a great resource, and I think some of you probably have already replaced the one you kept from last year that you keep during the year as a reference guide, replaced it with this. I cannot recommend it enough, and it's just, it reminds you of all the wonderful places to shop and eat and organizations and good pictures, and so it's great. This year, our mailbox received another, something else, the Lake Forest City Book. This is the first ever, this is the, okay, Susan, help me, what's the company? This is the people who do, JWC, okay, the Conister Group. Beautiful, beautiful book. Also very interesting articles. There's a whole set of thoughts on civic engagement. The mayor is featured in here. Well worth hanging on to. So we have these two journals. They don't take up all that much space, but I think you'll find yourself referring to them. And again, if you just need a reminder of how much we benefit by being in this community, both of these does that incredibly well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. A good resource, certainly for newcomers. Next agenda item is opportunity.
Mr. Mayor, if I could
yes,
add
please.
some comments here. And it does relate back to your comments when you were making the mayor's comments on the May 20th meeting with IDOT and the third rail issue. And it's a shame I have to make these comments after hearing Alderman Beidler's uplifting comments about everything that the city has going for it. But I know, Mr. Mayor, you used the words frustrations and challenges in your comments, and unfortunately those descriptive terms are shared by many folks, particularly in my ward. And I know after I learned of this April 20th meeting with IDOT, I shared with you and with others 5 areas that I called troubling. And one was the way of learning about the meeting that occurred on April 20th. It was folks in the action group asking me about it and telling me about it because they had heard about it through their counterparts at Glenview, who had heard about it when Glenview had a meeting with IDOT, I believe on the 27th of April, where comments were made about the earlier meeting with Lake Forest representatives. And yeah, in a way, it goes to this problem of transparency, communication, involvement. And again, I need to encourage to no end, we need to focus in on those attributes to deal with this subject matter. Another area of troubling was somewhat discussed earlier, and that's the funding for the engineering work in connection with the pedestrian underpass at the West train station. But I do take comfort if we're being told that we are not having any expenditures in that area until we do find out conclusively, do we have reimbursement funding or not. Which brings me to the next troubling point where, in listening to your comments and the additional work with the Lake County partners and all the effort being put into it, what I see, and I know many of my residents see, is such a significant amount of time, effort, and resources being put in and working with the railroads, working with the government officials to add the Amtrak stop and to get the funding for the pedestrian underpass. But that simply belies the argument that we've heard that the city is helpless in opposing the third rail due to lack of jurisdiction and authority. And it's troubling, too, that we don't seem to have that same effort. And some people would question, should it not be even a significant effort because of the impact from additional freight or idling freight in our community? And also, there's been expressions in over the last couple months by some aldermen, certainly by many residents, that we should be re-examining in light of developments, and there's been significant developments, and I can go through a litany of things over the last 18 months that have occurred, which says we do need to revisit the rationale, the cost-benefit, and the prioritization of the Amtrak stop, and in particular, the pedestrian underpass. And that's a dialogue that needs to be had, and it needs to involve the citizens. And the sooner we have it, I think the better off our community would be. And, you know, based upon what's been said apparently by IDOT, or at least inferences that have been drawn from what IDOT says, not what the city said, but from what IDOT said, you know, are they looking at the Amtrak stop and the underpass as being related to and a requirement only if the third track goes in? Because that is so inconsistent from what we've been operating under and what we were expecting here. And we really don't want that, hopefully, to influence actions by the city in connection with our opposition to the third rail. Next troubling point was a quote where there's reference that the city council is, quote, on record not committing to any future action or expenditure of funds until such time as the final EA is released, close quotes. To me, that's not true. I know, Mr. Mayor, you made a comment to that effect at the January 16, 2018 council meeting that I was not in attendance, but at the next council meeting, the very next council meeting, have it seen in the record, I question that very statement and said it behooves the council to continuously look for opportunities to oppose the holding track at all times. To my knowledge, we have no formal action committing the city to do nothing until the final EA is issued, nor think about it, should we. If we really have as our goal to persuade the powers to be to change the EA, to take the third track out of the EA, or if they're not willing to do it, recognize that there's a significant environmental impact and have them go the EIS route. That's what we need to do, and that's what we need to push before a final EA. And I do note that the council did go on record with the resolution 1805, beginning of April, where we did make clear that there was no delayed time or any mention of the final EA being any sort of precondition for action by this council. To the contrary, I read the direction in that ordinance in section 6 to the mayor and the city manager to be controlling at all times, including, obviously, at the meeting with IDOT on April 20th. But let me clarify maybe where some confusion does lie. I do agree that any legal action, albeit a lawsuit, litigation, over the EA does need to await the final EA and probably the issuance of the FONSI, which is the finding of no significant impact. That makes sense both legally and logically. However, the city should actively continue to try to influence the continuing EA process the best it can so that the final EA does not include the third rail, or else the sponsors finally realize an EIS is the right thing to do. Especially since, you know, what has been coming out clear, we have a unique potential environmental negative impact on our Middle Fork Savannah, from the idling trains, from the third track. And we should actively continue to encourage federal and state elected officials and Metra and IDOT, especially when we're given the opportunity of meeting with their officials, for them to withdraw their support for this project. It's clear these doors are still open for dialogue despite the passage of what's referred to as the EA comment period. The EA comment period closed back in January, or something like that. But they're still talking They're still looking for solutions. They're still working the thing. And anything we can do to help persuade is so much better, and it's so much less costly to make the effort now rather than the attitude of waiting till a final EA is issued, where you do need to hire high-powered lawyers. You do need to get involved in extensive litigation and discovery and all those things that go with the expensive litigation. If we can do something now, so much the better. The last comment relates to Glenview. As I think everyone on the council knows, and I think most of the citizens know, they also have a third track problem in their community. They've been very active in trying to deal with it. I'll use a better term, they've been very proactive in dealing with it, and including adopting a recent resolution for funding different actions, including in the area of research, communication, and lobbying. Their actions have resulted in a significant amount of collaboration and harmony among their community, something that we should envy and hopefully a lesson we learn. Thank you.
There's so many things in there, I don't quite know where to begin. The comment period is closed. I suppose you can go camp outside people's offices, but there's a very well-worn process for EAs, and I just don't think they're inviting comment. The other reality is that it's been an established principle for many years, as you know, that EISs are not done on established railway corridors, again, by operation of, I say principle, but it's been that way in the railroad industry for a long time and by various understandings between federal departments. So the opportunity to get an EIS is actually, I think, quite slim, just my personal opinion. And it's really, if you think about the thousands and thousands of miles of railroad lines that go through federal wildlife preserves, that go through some of the prime swamp and wetlands in America, North America, and so forth, and they do not require EISs to do work within established rights-of-ways. I don't think that's really the route. The route, as I have suggested myself, based on a lot of study of this and talking to folks, is really through the funding. There is no money for this project, zero. That's the place to attack it. Where did this project come from? Who really proposed it? And how do they propose to fund it? That's where the opportunities are, and that's where persuasion and conversation can work. Not chasing the EIA and EIS, I believe, because that's just off in a very whole established set of environmental review and practices and so forth that I just don't think it's going to get anywhere. The more I've looked at this, the more I believe this project will never be built in my lifetime, okay? That's the place to do it. There is no money for it, okay?
Yeah. If you could come in with a signed contract.
Is this on the agenda?
Well, no. This
Well, then
is
what
an
do we,
issue.
then,
This is an issue that we should be discussing and not ignoring. But let me just, I won't, I've talked enough, I recognize, but let me just make one comment, Mr. Mayor. I spent the time going through the 30 projects that the FRA has from their website, looking at how many are EISs, how many are EAs. And of them, 25 are EISs. The 5 that are
new or
EAs,
established corridors.
the 5 EAs deal with a train station, siding track. The closest thing is a 1.1 mile connecting track to 2 double tracks. Nothing like we're talking about from Milwaukee all the way down to Chicago with 10 projects, including the 3 mile here, comes close to an EA that they've looked at. So the precedent maybe is there. Again, I don't want to go into a legal argument, and this is not the forum, and I agree, Alderman Reisenberg, we shouldn't be dwelling unduly on this, but I think these points needed to be made.
Okay, next item of business is the opportunity for citizens to address the council on non-agenda items. David Tanaka, 1142 Pine Oaks, Lake Forest.
Thank you, Alderman Bushman, for your usually salient and spot-on comments. I'm going to dovetail on some of what Alderman Bushman said, because I think a natural extension on behalf of the Citizens for Action is a call for the Lake Forest City Manager, Bob Kiley, to resign immediately for malfeasance in office and misfeasance. It is undisputed that the city manager, among other things, surreptitiously funneled funds exceeding $200,000 to a lobbyist in clear violation of the law. It is also undisputed that Mr. Kiley perverted the accounting and budget system in the city of Lake Forest to conceal those lobbying payments from the city council's view. The city attorney resigned when this malfeasance was brought to light, and Mr. Kiley should likewise resign, since he was the architect of Lobbygate, the whole scheme. As you know, members of the council, Citizens for Action has worked with the city of Glenview and has used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain the history surrounding Mr. Kiley's actions concerning the third rail. People under the city manager's control repeatedly have refused to produce requested information, and it took the intervention by a member of the city council to get any semblance of production. Public records supplied by numerous agencies show that Mr. Kiley has taken and continues to take actions that erode the trust of the city and that are contrary to the city council's express direction to oppose construction of the third rail. In many years in working as a private and public attorney, including years as a general counsel of a public company, wherever I worked, when an employee concealed and misrepresented facts to further his own and not the company's agenda, he was encouraged to leave. And if he refused, he was fired. When an employee repeatedly deviated from explicit company directives or tried to undermine company objectives, he was asked to resign. Most employees had the common sense to negotiate the terms of their departure. If Mr. Kiley does not resign, we call upon the City Council to terminate his contract for cause. In just the past few weeks, we have seen Mr. Kiley continue to defy the City Council's 2 unanimous resolutions opposing the third rail. We take this as yet another clear sign that Mr. Kiley has his own agenda to create a 3-mile-long freight train parking lot in a residential community and the sensitive Middle Fork, Savannah. Failure to remove Mr. Kiley as city manager is tantamount to allowing him to create a house divided, I'll finish very quickly, in Lincoln's words, where city employees are free to implement their own policies and procedures, pursuing their own interests at the city's expense, to the detriment of city residents, community health, property values, and the overall quality of life. Thank you.
Next is Joanne Desmond, 1681 Yale Court. As I stated previously, there'll be no applauding or cheering. It's a form of bullying, as it deters other people from bringing up opposing points of view, all right? We will not be doing that, okay? If anybody does that again, they will be asked to leave. I've called the next witness, or next question asker.
I don't think she heard you.
I don't think she heard you. I don't think
She
she
didn't
heard
hear? Oh, because of the applause. Oh. Joanne Desmond, 1681 Yale Court.
Thank you. I'm going to change my comments because I appreciate the comments of Ray Bushman, who echoed many of the things that we've been concerned about. I need to ask the mayor, when we repeatedly have heard you say that this won't happen in your lifetime, that we are not working tirelessly hour after hour to help our community for our lifetime. We are working for the future of our city, for the children that will grow up here. Believe me, if this doesn't happen in my lifetime, I don't really care, but I can't leave a legacy that our forefathers have worked very hard to protect and preserve in our community because something might not happen in my lifetime. I've heard you say that numerous times, and I really need to make a record of that. As far as no money being available, that's not important either, although we do know through our documents that FAST money is available, F-A-S-T, that's an acronym, and there will be money available if and when the FONSI is released. So what we are asking is that this not ever be in the future strategic plan of our community, that we work hard together, and that's what we want. We want to work together. We've always wanted to work together so this doesn't happen in our community. That's the most important thing for us. We look at Glenview and we see how they are working in concert together. We are the same community. Let's be one together. That's what we ask. Thank you.
Next is Rick Cusack, 1126 Pine Oak Circle.
I'm here tonight on behalf of the Action Group of Lake Forest to request that the City Council rescind Mr. Kiley's employment contract or ask for his immediate resignation. From the onset of this sad debacle regarding the third rail, one factor has remained constant throughout: the lies, duplicity, and collusion of the city manager in doing everything in his considerable power to undermine and discredit the efforts of the City Council and the residents of Lake Forest to fight this project. Kiley intentionally withheld critical information from both the City Council and residents that he learned that at the sponsored webinars in 2012 and 14 regarding the EA project. Then he lied at an open public meeting in October 2016 about his attendance at these webinars, subsequently claiming that he forgot. In early 2017, Kiley embarked on a scheme to undermine and override a 2016 resolution demanding a combined suburban investigation of the proposed EA by drafting his own resolution, with neither notice to nor permission from the City Council, which totally contradicted the earlier resolution. In fact, it clearly and intentionally lied, stating that now there was support from the community for the EA. I'd love to see it. He passed around this resolution to Norm Carlson and other members of IDOT and WSDOT and other parties he has surreptitiously dealt with for their input. It was never adopted. Kiley was also the epicenter of the scheme with the mayor and city attorney in early 2016 to enter into a lobbying contract for the sole purpose of obtaining an Amtrak stop through intense political pressure at significant cost to the taxpayers. At no time was notice given to the council requesting approval of the substantial $200,000 expenditure as required by city code. Kiley's response? In retrospect, I would have done it differently, minimizing his misconduct by referring to it as a purchasing procedure oversight over 18 months. As a result of their combined unscrupulous actions, the city attorney resigned in disgrace and is now under investigation by the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. To date, notwithstanding the recommendations in the Jeter report of a clear violation of the city code by Kiley, Kiley has not only not been disciplined for his actions, but his contract is actually up for renewal for another year. I find that unbelievable. One quick statement. At stake now are not only the health, safety, and welfare of Lake Forest, but also the city's historical values. Do we value having honesty and integrity in our city manager and in city government? If the city council believes that honesty and integrity in city government are important values, there is no choice but to terminate the services of the current city manager.
Are there any other comments from the audience? If not, next item of business is the omnibus vote. Consideration, there are 10 items. Approval of the April 2nd council meeting minutes. approval of the executive session minutes dating from March of 2017 through April the 2nd, 2018. Approval of the check register for the last month. Approval of establishment of an account with the Amazon business. Approval of benefit consulting services to be provided in fiscal year 2019 by Wright Benefit Strategies. Award of the Lake Forest share of the joint 2018 annual pavement patching program. Award of the 2018 sanitary sewer inflow and infiltration testing project. Consideration of ordinances approving recommendations from the Building Review Board, which would be a first reading and if desired by council, a final approval. And consideration of ordinances approving recommendations from the Zoning Board of Appeals, first reading and if desired by council, a final approval. And last, consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission, first reading and if desired by council, final approval. As we've done before, any of these items could be removed for separate vote, but are there any particular questions or clarifications on any of these items? Alderman Moreno.
I would like to pull out the approval to establish an account with Amazon Business. And my rationale to do so is that I don't understand the processes and procedures to manage that account, and I'd like to understand it a little bit more deeply. I'm concerned about the freedom with which purchases can be made by anyone on Amazon, and I don't fully appreciate how we will manage our business purchases. So I'd like to pull it out.
So it's on the agenda for tonight. Do you want to, could you ask a question perhaps of staff about that?
Certainly,
tonight,
we can do that now. Sure.
Mr. Mayor, what we can do is we can pull that item from the omnibus agenda, act on the rest of the omnibus agenda if there are no other items,
All right,
and then come
okay.
back and visit that item.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to note that I was recused from a number, if not all, of those executive session meetings, so I would not be voting to approve those minutes.
Okay. Yep, that's fair. Okay, any other comments? We'll do I have a motion to approve items 1 through 10 with the exception of number 4?
So moved.
Second.
Actually, I should ask, is there any public comment on any of these items before we take a motion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Pfeiffer? Aye. Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
I would say aye, except for those particular minutes.
Noted. Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
8 yea with notes. Motion carries.
Thank you. Coming back to item number 4.
Thank you.
Who's the leading expert? Of course, it's Julie Hall from the Finance Department. Diane Hall.
Annie Hall.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Actually, I was prepared for the questions tonight.
Shocking.
Okay. Currently, departments are purchasing from Amazon, but they're going, they have different people have set up accounts with city emails, and they're going through the consumer side and using the city credit cards to make those purchases and make payments on those. And those purchases are actually reviewed during the monthly statement review, so the invoices are looked at just to see exactly what is being purchased from Amazon. The advantages of a business account with Amazon, which is a new program that Amazon has developed, because so many businesses are using Amazon to make purchases for their businesses. They've now instituted security levels that you can put on the account where you can set individual levels by person and by department. So we were going to put a $500 limit per person, and if they hit that $500 level, it would automatically refer to like the department head to actually approve that before it was actually purchased. Or if it got, then for the organization set a $5,000 limit, so by the purchasing policies, if it hit $5,000 for a purchase, it would have to go to like the city manager to actually approve that purchase. And we can also set where now anybody with that account can make a purchase on a credit card. We can actually limit the number of people that would be authorized to purchase. You can set where you can have people that can just shop but not purchase, so it would actually direct to the department to be reviewed prior to making a purchase.
Diane, those limits that you referred to, the 500,000, 5,000, are they per transaction, or is there a time period that they're accumulated over?
It would be for a single purchase. So if there was a number of items that reached that $500 limit,
okay,
it would
is
trigger
there a way
that
of looking
approval.
if a 500 or $499 is done today and $499 next week and $499 week after, to look at from a cumulative standpoint?
Right now, they haven't quite finished the security level since it's a new program, but right now it's just a single purchase. And we can also run reports to show exactly which, by department, what they're purchasing, how much they're purchasing, and also as an organization. And we can also, they've a whole bunch of different reporting now capabilities.
I think, if I may, it would be even better, as opposed to a reporting function, that there be an automatic limit per person, not just by transaction, but over time. And I mean, clearly a department head would need to do that. But if that security level could be set as opposed to having to generate a report and look at a report, I think it would just be easier for especially the staff that's looking at reports, and it would be an automated function.
Yeah, the security is through Amazon, so they trigger the approval levels. And we do have included in the administrative directive to match the purchasing policies that they're not allowed to split purchases. So to make a $300 purchase and then add another $300 to split those, that those will be looked at.
Are there any limits in the credit card that's issued to the individual employee?
It's set by the credit card threshold. So if a department head has a $1,000 credit limit, that would be the maximum that they could with all their other purchases for the month.
Diane, who would we have been buying these things from before Amazon Business existed, or Amazon existed? A smaller. I mean, was it? I'm not sure. I'm like Alderman Moran. I'm just trying to get my mind around this a little bit, but. So I'm assuming that these credit cards, the issue isn't the credit card usage, but we're dealing with a specific contract and relationship with Amazon Business. So in the past, would have been a bunch of smaller businesses that we were dealing with, or where would this stuff have come from that Amazon's sending now?
Based on the credit card statement reviews, a lot of them, the purchases are like iPad covers or cell phone holders. So a lot of it is smaller purchases right now. So they would have been going through the current like cell phone provider or going to an electronics store for those type of purchases. I've seen smaller furniture purchases. So it would be, so I haven't seen many specialty purchases.
We have a constant sort of mantra about shopping local here, so to the extent that this replaced shopping local, I think it would bother me a little bit. We want to support our local merchants. Saving money is great, maybe even saving sales tax, but we fight ourselves when we don't pay sales tax. So is any of this replacing some of our shop local merchants?
I might add, and maybe I'll even ask Chief Carl Wardolf if he'd come forward, because, not to put you on the spot, Chief, but they've probably been trailblazers in this because, and I think this gets back a little to Alderman Bushman's question, I think we have to keep in mind that these individual departments have very limited supply budgets. And so it's incumbent upon them to find the cheapest price for whatever it is they're buying, because if they don't, they run out of money and they therefore can't buy other things. And I know that the police department, when they would go, and I'll just say boots for a new police officer, they would look at 2 or 3 sites, and Amazon would have the cheapest price, and therefore they would charge those boots off to the city credit card, and there are limits for each of the departments in terms of what their monthly credit card is. But what they found over a period of time is that when they would price shop, because they're always trying to look for the cheapest price, that Amazon kept coming in at a cheaper price, and that's before any discounts that were in place as well. To answer the question, were there some things that were done locally? Absolutely. But I think the magnitude of things that we buy for the operating departments are not sold by our vendors here in Lake Forest. But Chief, I'll let you give more specific examples.
Right, we were a big proponent of this account because we make a lot of smaller purchases, and over time, a lot of those purchases would be from our vendors, for example, our uniform vendors, of which we might have 3 or 4 in the state to competitively bid through. And over the last 6 years, it started to become a habit with us, which anytime we got quotes from, say, a uniform company for, say, 10 holsters, we would jump on Amazon and see if we could get the same holster for cheaper, and inevitably we could. And the savings might only be $80 for those 8 holsters, but it adds up in that we're constantly buying equipment like that, small items. We might need 6 or 7 padded cases for cameras because the old ones are starting to break as they're in the cars. So little things like that, and we were finding over and over again that we could save $50 or $100 on these purchases through Amazon versus through any of our normal vendors. Now that doesn't always work out. There's a lot of things we can't get from them. But smaller furniture purchases, those types of things, they were just beating our normal vendors, often by a considerable margin. So.
And you're recycling the boxes, I assume.
We are, yeah.
Diane, I just need to be a little educated on this. How many, and I don't understand even now, how many people have credit cards or are able to charge to these accounts by picking up the phone? How many staff members? Is this restricted to department heads or what?
It's mostly the department heads, but there are like superintendents that do have cards. So there's probably like 15 to 20 max credit cards out there that all have a lot of limits that are like $1,500, so they don't have very high limits. And then another advantage is that all of the purchases would be tax exempt, because right now for the consumer side, you don't always have the tax exempt status, which is required in the purchasing policies. And we're able to regulate how many people actually have an account, where now on the consumer side, you can just use an email address and set up one. This way we have more control over who actually can purchase on Amazon.
Yeah, that would be my concern, is security of who could charge and, who has the cards.
Yeah, because that would be totally under city control, and then anybody that has a city email address out there, it would actually be brought under this program, so that can be limited also.
Well, thank you. So, Alderman Moreno, is that
Thank you.
satisfactory explanation?
I appreciate the detail. Thank you, everyone, for listening through.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would like to move to establish the account with the Amazon business.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any comment from the audience on this matter? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Next on the agenda is ordinances, and we have one this evening, approval of an ordinance amending City Code Section 3837 relating to purchasing, to be presented by Elizabeth Holub, Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor Lansing. This is a minor code revision to bring in line the city code with the purchasing policies and procedures at the April Finance Committee meeting. The Finance Committee approved several changes to the city's purchasing directive. One of them related to provisions that were included in the city code. and it related to the provision of supplies and parts throughout the year, where those individual purchases were less than 20, but they may aggregate over 20,000 for the course of the year. And the change was to have that reported and approved by the Finance Committee Chairman. So we've simply copied that language from the purchasing directive into the city code and proposed that amendment in the proposed ordinance.
Any questions, comments? We've been over this a number of times.
I would move to approve it.
Second.
Is there any comment from the public on this item? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
There being no new business before the council, we have additional items for council discussion. Fabulous gifts and prizes. What is that surprise?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm sure you've noticed that Alderman Tack has never looked happier than he is tonight.
How do you tell the difference?
Just look happy all the time.
Good one, Tim. Set the tone.
But I'd like to make a few comments before giving Alderman Tack a few gifts and prizes. You know, when Alderman Tack first came on the council, I was a little apprehensive because I had no experience and really no knowledge of who Alderman Tack was. All I had to go on was my wife, who said, "Oh, he's really a great guy." And what I learned, though, over the past 6 years is that Alderman Tack is probably one of the most thoughtful and brightest aldermen I've had the pleasure of working with for 27 years. He's, as I said, both thoughtful but also very direct in what he says, which I greatly appreciated. One of the things I've really admired is the fact that he's not afraid to tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And we joke at times about the median on Route 60, but underneath all that good-natured ribbing is the fact that at the end of the day, he was right in exactly what he was saying, in that we were not addressing the underlying problem and just sort of masking it by dropping in more trees that would ultimately die in a year or two. And so he really challenged us to do the right thing. And as you know, he has done repeatedly over the 6 years that he's been on the city council. So on behalf of the city staff, we are going to miss you, and we wish you very well, and we thank you very much for your service to the community and to the organization. We really much appreciate it. Thank you. And to begin the prizes.
Whoa. Whoa. Whoa, that's way too early.
No, you've got other prizes, don't worry. You've got other things. But as a tradition, and our budget is small, so we have 2 small prizes for you. One being the street sign and one being that somewhere, wherever you choose, that a tree will be planted in your honor. So,
on the median.
Congratulations. On the median, right. So congratulations.
I'm pretty sure that the street sign, without knowing what it says, is Tack Highway, because it's my way or the highway. How disappointing.
What is it?
Tack Place.
Thank you.
Tack Place.
Tack Place.
Jed?
Well, I have only been on a year, so I haven't seen all of the stellar moments of your career over the 6 years. But I was reminded, I sent him a note that someone once said, "Free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last." And so you are free to go on and do other things for the city. I'm sure you'll be back in some form on some committee, I hope. And congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks.
Randy, I think I sent you a note as well saying that one of the things I like best about you, and it's a little bit what Bob said, I could count on you getting me to look at things from a different point of view. And I think that's really how we work best. We need, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of us. It's a pretty big community, and there aren't a whole lot of us. And I think having the opportunity to have somebody you can really rely on to go, but, you know, or have we considered, and you're really good at that. And I think you also, and I would say with Bob, very thoughtful, and often quite unique perspectives. And so I don't think I'm the only one. I'm really glad I'm kind of at the early end of this, because I don't think I'm the only one who would make this comment. Something that has really enhanced, I think, for all of us, the experiences on the council. I would also say congratulations on the work you did on that line crossing, and the good news for those of us who retire in a couple of years, next year, a couple of years after, we don't have to see that line cross either. So thanks, I know you, and in fact, this is not a ribbing or facetious comment. Randy worked incredibly hard on the pension conversation and brought some real insights to that are enormously valuable, and we will think of as we watch that line not cross. So thank you. I think the thing I would sum up is there has never been any question in any of our minds of your utter commitment to the community and your ability to express it in your own, absolutely, I'll say it again, unique way, but you've added enormous value to our discussion, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Randy, in my short tenure with you on this council, I've learned that you can always be counted on to give your unabashed opinion on a matter. I believe throughout your dedicated service to the city, you've kept the interests of your constituents always utmost in your mind and in your deliberations, and I thank you for that. I also thank you for your, what I would call a dissertation on the pension crisis in this city. I listened to it actually numerous times in preparation for coming on to this council, and it gave me great insight into the pension issues facing this city and really the state at large. And I thank you for your very thorough work on that and how it truly enlightened me. Thank you.
Well, Randy, when I came on 3 years ago, I viewed you as this iconoclastic, Supreme Court-like figure in isolation, occasionally descending upon us with a rapier wit comment that basically halted a conversation in its tracks. But from that point, I learned that your passion is quite deep, and I appreciate all the mentoring that you gave me and encouragement, and I think the council will be less in your absence, and I wish you the very best in the future.
Moreno, Jack, you're going to pass?
Oh, you may come back to me.
Well, I will start with what an honor it has been. Difficult at times, not sure which direction we might be going, but knowing that when we got there, we would know very clearly what we were talking about. And for that, I'm very grateful, because it's very easy to get mired in a discussion and in a debate, and your clarity is phenomenal. Whether it's on city council, whether it's on a finance topic, the pension fund. I mean, I was surprised at all of the times you brought to bear intelligence that went well beyond and well researched. And I will call out two specific committees where I've had the honor. One is the Fire Vision 2020, where your experience and your knowledge were excellent and just really brought a lot to the discussions, again, with clarity. And the other, clearly, Public Works. You know we need to spend money, and you know that we need to do it wisely, and we need to do it with great deal of forethought, and sometimes that is not always to everyone's continuous benefit. We have to take turns, because there's only so many dollars to go around. So it's truly been an honor to work with you, and I will miss you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Tack. I've known you a little more than a year on the council. Unfortunately, I never had the pleasure of knowing you beforehand, and I certainly have heard all these great things about you, and I have no reason to doubt the service that you provided to the community for 6 years now. Now, a comment was made that you are bright and blunt, and I certainly can second that, because your brightness and bluntness I've borne the brunt of a few times. But I recognize that that's part of the dialogue and part of something we should encourage and continue in a civil manner. And I hope you do have a wonderful retirement. And again, great knowing you.
Oh, I'm next?
Yes, you.
We've served together for 5 years. It's a long time. It's a lot of beers on Saturday, solving the city's problems and world peace. It's interesting, you know, we're kind of very different, and in many ways, we're very much the same. You're from East Lake Forest. I'm from West Lake Forest. You're very tall. I'm not quite as tall. You rarely speak. Often I can't keep my trap shut. But we have things in common too. As much as you rarely speak and are accused of being a good listener, I do know that you mastered the same technique that I did in college. You were able to fall asleep with your eyes open. That speaks to the rarely speaking. But you also have had a strong commitment to West Lake Forest, particularly, as Bob said, to the Route 60 median. You were always behind us when we did the project initially, when we redid it, and then we might have even done it a third time. You did. You never complained about the cost. You absolutely never complained about the cost.
$500,000.
Well, yeah, but you know, it looks nice.
It does.
And as a result of that, Michael Thomas and I have several gifts for you. Michael, would you like to go first?
Why don't you get yours? I will get
Okay.
We're still in the category of fabulous.
Probably fertilizer. Am I to open?
Oh, yes.
Did you wrap this?
No, that's Susan Banks.
Hold it. Turn it outside.
Well, no matter which way you look at it, and one's going east and one's going west.
That's the
right?
That's the Route 60 median.
All right.
In its finest hour.
It's a little hard to look at. Thank you. That's
Well,
perfect. I drive by it every day. You know how lovely it is.
Michael.
Alderman Tack.
Yes, sir.
To continue that theme of the Route 60 median, Public Works has a little gift. We don't ever want you to forget the Route 60 median, so we have something we think you could put in your garage. We doubt you'll put it in your bedroom, but I think the garage would be more apropos. But in general, Public Works, thank you very much for all the time and support you gave us on all of our projects, all of our operations, everything that we've worked with you on. We really do appreciate your candidness, your directness. It's been a joy working with you, so thank you. So with that, I have to say, low bid on the wrapping paper.
Yes.
Did not secure 3 votes, I apologize.
From Amazon, was it? I love the tape.
So is this? No?
I don't know.
That's great.
Oh, I'm liking it. I'm liking it.
Do not cross the medium.
Super.
Awesome.
Randy, you will be missed. Years ago, I was lucky to learn from some boards I was on to always pay attention to the quiet man or woman there who was always paying attention. Be sure that they got a chance to speak. And you're the single best example I've ever known on council of spare words, master of the short declarative sentence, and always on the bullseye of the logic and the direction and giving steerage to what we're doing, as Michelle said. And you'll be sorely missed. I will very quickly say, though, mayors have a way of finding people. So we know where you are, and as we move forward in some of your other initiatives, your advisory will be called upon. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I should speak. The one thing you can be assured of is that this will be shorter than most of Alderman Bushman's comments. I'm quite certain my wife wonders who they're talking about here. This has been a really fabulous journey for me. Just a very brief story. How this whole thing came about for me was really unusual. I was just speaking with a group of friends. Some city-related topic came up, and somebody asked what I thought about it, and I gave a comment on it. And the next thing I know, I was being asked to interview for a position as an alderman. Now, for me, that was unexpected because I hadn't had the opportunity, because of my work life, et cetera, to do other city-related things. So I figured, well, sure, I'll interview and this will go nowhere and we'll just at least have started that process. And I was interested because my father had been a trustee for the village of Glen Ellen for numerous years, and I remember being fascinated about the garbage discussions as a child. So anyway, I interviewed with 8 people and figured that's going nowhere. And next thing I know, I was asked to interview in front of some more people. And I did that, and I figured that was going nowhere. And this is where nowhere is, apparently. And the person who made that happen for me was Liz Moore, who, for some reason, sort of decided to champion me. And I really appreciate that because this was really an amazing gift. I remember when I first came on the council, nobody knew who I was, and that's a blessing and a curse. I've been a real pain in the rump of 3 different mayors and Bob Kiley, and I appreciate them for putting up with me. I do, I'm not good at subtlety, so sometimes that's a little painful for all involved. But I do think that over the past 6 years, it's been just an amazing thing to do. I learned so much about how the city works, and I have to say, for all of the criticism and the acrimony and the arguments and the discussion we have, this city is unbelievably well run. The professional people who work here, and I could name them all, but I won't because then I'll forget somebody, but these people are great at what they do. They love what they do. Things I knew nothing about, I could sit with them for 15 minutes and I'd know like everything about it. It's just incredible to work with them, and they're so committed to the city. And they really make all of us look very good. And that's not the easiest thing in the world. Sometimes we don't make ourselves look so good, and they really bail us out. All that being said, my wife's given up a lot. She's, I work relatively long hours, and adding this on took me away a little bit too, so I thank her for doing that. And I do hope that in the future I get an opportunity to do something else that's meaningful with the city. I don't know what that is, but I'm around. So anyway, to literally everybody, the last people I'd like to thank is the caucus, because I have to say this. I was the last person in the world that the caucus probably needed to nominate for this position. I'm sure that lots of people took lots of heat for that over a several-year period of time, maybe ongoing. But if they rolled the dice and tried something different, and I hope that I paid them back with something they can be proud of. So anyway, to all of you, thank you very much. And the guy who's replacing me has a lot more hair, which is good. And he's a super nice guy, and I'm sure he'll be way better than I ever was. And to all of you, honestly, it's been a pleasure getting to know all of you. And I know sometimes we argue and fight a little bit, but that's good. Argument is what this is all about. It's the process. So thank you.
Thank you so much. There being no further business, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn this first session.
So moved.
Second.
The meeting is adjourned, and we will start the second session in 5 minutes.
I'm downstairs. New territory, session two.
Welcome to the second session of the City Council of May 7th, 2018. Will the city clerk call for the organization of the 2018-2019 Lake Forest City Council?
Can I call for the organization of the 2018-2019 Lake Forest City Council?
Yes, you may. Will you please administer the oath of office to Alderman-elect Prudence R. Beidler, Timothy P. Newman, James S. Preschlack, and Michelle Moreno.
Oh, ward order.
Ward order.
You could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Having been elected to the office of Alderman. Having been elected to the office of Alderman. In the city of Lake Forest. In the city of Lake Forest. In the county of Lake. In the county of Lake. And in the state of Illinois. In the state of Illinois. Do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear. That I will support the Constitution of the United States. That I will support the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the state of Illinois. And the Constitution of the state of Illinois. And that I will discharge the duties of said office. And that I will discharge the duties of said office. According to the best of my ability. According to the best of my ability. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Honorable Mayor Lansing.
Here.
Alderman Beidler.
Here.
Alderman Morris.
Here.
Alderman Newman.
Here.
Alderman Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Preschlack.
Here.
Alderman Moreno.
Here.
Alderman Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item of business is the election and appointment of city officers. For City Treasurer, Elizabeth A. Holland. City Supervisor, Robert R. Kiley, Jr. The City Marshal and Collector, Carl Waldorf. The City Clerk, Margaret Boyer. And the City Surveyor and Engineer, Gewalt Hamilton and Associates. May I have a motion to approve these appointments?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item of business is comments by the mayor, and I have the very lovely duty to read a resolution of appreciation for Stanford Randy Tack, 3rd Ward Alderman, May 2012 to May 2018. Whereas during his term of office, he served as a member of the City Council and Finance Committee, served as chairman of the Public Works Committee, served on the Property and Public Lands Committee, was liaison to the Parks and Recreation Department in Croya. Whereas Public Works Chairman Randy Tack steadily dealt with many important issues, including Sprinkler-Free Mondays program. That is a big program. Stormwater management and flooding, the city's historic gas lights, beach access road, and ravine erosion. And whereas Randy Tack served on the Fire Vision 2020 Committee, where a comprehensive assessment and appraisal of the city's fire suppression and emergency medical services was undertaken with the goal of developing a sustainable and innovative framework for providing service levels commensurate with resident expectations. And whereas during the time he spent on the Fire Vision 2020 Committee, he was instrumental in analyzing the city's public safety pension funding obligations. And whereas in an effort to enhance residents' enjoyment of the beautiful lakefront during summer evening hours, advocated for the service of adult beverages at Lake Forest Beach. Small matter.
Hear, hear.
Whereas no matter the subject, Randy Tack always chose his words carefully, expressed his viewpoints wisely, and often offered a unique and innovative perspective which had yet not been considered by others. And whereas he has devoted much valuable time and personal attention to the work of these committees and the duties of the City Council, and on behalf of the citizens of Lake Forest, continually met his responsibilities with purpose and dedication. And whereas the citizens of Lake Forest recognize and are deeply appreciative of the valuable time and service contributed to the preservation and improvement of the quality of life in our community, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Forest, Illinois, hereby expresses the profound gratitude of the citizens of Lake Forest to Stanford Randy Tack for the loyal and faithful public service he has given by means of this resolution, which shall be spread upon the permanent records of the City Council, adopted by the City Council of the City of Lake Forest the 7th day of May, 2018. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Randy, I hate to say it, we're going to miss you. We're going to have a picture taken.
There you go.
Make sure you were properly signed.
Thanks so much.
Next item on the agenda are the 2018-2019 Board and Commission appointments and reappointments. For the Audit Committee, Ty Magnuson, Dean Steiber, William Smith, Bill McFadden, and Vince Sparrow, who also will serve as chair. For the Building Review Board, Fred Moyer and Richard Walther. On the Cemetery, 2 reappointments, John Dick and Dr. Dan Kelly. On the Elua Farm Commission, Diane Fitzsimons, Alex Hodges, and Barry Hollingsworth to serve as chair. For the Gorton Commission, Nick Bothfield as an appointment, along with Joe Waldeck and Karen Rode, reappointed. Historic Preservation Commission, Bill Redfield, Wells Wheeler, Elizabeth Sperry, and Bruce Grieve, all reappointed with Bruce Grieve as chair. For the Housing Trust Fund, the reappointment of Chris Baker. The Legal Committee, reappointment of Tim Franzen, Anthony Mancini, and Jason Maxwell. Reappointed to the Library Board, Carrie Travers, Wendy Darling, and David Rose. Parks and Recreation Board, Steve Reimer and Paul Best, reappointed. New appointments of Nancy Duffy, Richard Adams, and William Zordani as a student member of the Park and Recreation Board. Public Service Award Committee, Tom Swarthout, Maddie Dugan to also serve as chair, Debbie Saran as an appointment, and along with Catherine Waldeck. Senior Resources Commission, Sally Kelly and Mark Dillon, reappointments. New appointments of Carol Champ and Gail Strenger Wayne. For the Zoning Board of Appeals, 5 reappointments, Mark Pasquesi, Mike Seaman, Kevin Lewis, Nancy Novitt, and Louis Pickus to serve as chair. May I have a motion to approve these mayor appointments and reappointments?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the announcement of City Council committee appointments. You have in your packets those appointments, and for some it's the same as last year. We have, of course, some musical chairs with Randy retiring and bringing Alderman Preslak aboard. There's 2 parents beaming out there in the audience, if you haven't noticed. They're leaving. Just one. Next item on the agenda is the Lake Forest Day proclamation. Whereas the McKinlock Post 264 of the American Legion is undertaken to provide appropriate exercises and entertainment in celebration of Lake Forest Day on Wednesday, August the 1st, 2018, with a view to bringing together the people of our city in the furtherance of civic interest and advancement of community fellowship. And whereas the McKinlock Post 264 of the American Legion honors Lake Forest residents, employees, neighbors, and friends by adopting the theme, Lake Forest American Legion salutes Northwestern Medicine Lake Forest Hospital, the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Historical Society, and Reading Power, Inc. Therefore, it be hereby proclaimed that said Lake Forest Day celebration is declared to be a city fair, and in pursuance thereof, and Tuesday, July 31st, 2018, and Wednesday, August 1st, 2018, shall be observed as a holiday in the city of Lake Forest, and our people are urged to forsake their ordinary pursuits and gather in West Park in a spirit of comradeship and goodwill in support of the ideals of our fair city. Signed, Robert T.E. Lansing. Mayor, may I have a motion to adopt this proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So adopted. Next is comments by the city manager, Bob Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I can't think of a better way to start off the new fiscal year with the new council than to whip you into shape physically, and going to talk about a new program, Go Lake Forest. And this evening I want to introduce the Recreation Department Facilities Manager, Jason Busdecker, who is going to talk about this new program, not just for the council, but it's for the whole community. Jason?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As Bob mentioned, I'd like to introduce you to a new community-wide program called Go Lake Forest. The Go initiative initially started by the Gurney Park District a handful of years ago and has since expanded upon into including the Lake County Health Department. And therefore, Lake County Health Department has adopted Go Lake County. They are trying to expand the Go initiative throughout all communities within Lake County, Illinois. Currently, Lake Forest will be one of 18 communities that has adopted or are adopting the Go initiative this year or has done in previous years. So our objective as a community is to work together as a whole to promote an active and healthy lifestyle throughout everyone within the community, all ages, all ability levels. Currently, we would like to create 2 to 3 community-wide Go Lake Forest specific events, including our kickoff event coming up on May 19th, which I'll expand upon in a couple of minutes. In addition to those specific Go Lake Forest events, we'd also like to promote the brand of Go Lake Forest throughout community events that are currently already in progress from other organizations. For example, the Lake Forest Day 5K Fun Run and the Lake Forest Police Department Bike Rodeo. And obviously we want that list to grow as we expand our program. So our community partners so far, we have 11 partners within the community that have been part of the planning process, have pledged to be part of the effort to promote Go Lake Forest. And we're hoping, again, this initial list will continue to grow as our program grows. So our initial kickoff event will be on Saturday, May 19th. We are going to meet outside the metro station, downtown Lake Forest here, a couple blocks away. We will be doing a community walk. It'll be non-competitive, non-timed community walk for 2 miles. We'll be utilizing the bike path. So we'll be utilizing that bike path to walk 1 mile north, and then we'll turn around and come 1 mile south for a total of roughly about 30 minutes or so, depending on individuals' walking speed. We will have free giveaways for those individuals that wish to participate and join us. We encourage everyone to come out, bring your strollers, bring your children, bring your dogs. Everybody is welcome. And staff would like to invite all members of the City Council, as well as all members of the community, to be part of our event on May 19th, starting at 9 a.m. Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the event?
Jason, what's the weather going to be like on May 19th?
Be 65 and partly cloudy.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Always a good thought. Next item of business, comments by council members.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I have another event I'd like to share. It was an event that was referenced at our last council meeting, a presentation or an educational forum open to the community presented by the Citizens for Action of Lake Forest on the third rail issue. It was held at Gordon Community Center on Wednesday evening, April 25th. It was well attended. The information was provided on Amtrak's proposed Hiawatha expansion project, also on the EA or environmental assessment process that we're going through now, and on the health, safety, and environmental impacts from freight operations. The folks produced a 3-minute video that was shared with the audience, somewhat of a Lake Forest version of a similar video that was produced by Glenview, the village of Glenview, in their opposition to the third rail plans to construct that in their community. It has some very nice drone videos showing the tracks and the areas where the proposed holding track is planned in our community. Because I know some of my fellow aldermen have not had the chance to view the presentation or to see the video, I'd like to ask the folks at Action if they would provide each alderman and the mayor a link to the PowerPoint presentation and the video. And also I'd ask at the request of Action that we consider on our website, rather than a link to Action, actually have the PowerPoint presentation and the video on our website under the environmental assessment. But again, I'd ask each council member to look at the video and the presentation and let me know if you would feel there's a consensus to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Next item is...
Rob, I'm sorry, I have a comment. I just wanted to thank all the aldermen for your time and helping me get up to speed on the agenda of the council, and I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you one-on-one. And I wanted to thank also Randy for that. I'm sorry he left, but he was very helpful, and I really, really, really appreciate his kindness and help getting up to speed, and all of yours, frankly. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, and it goes a long way for someone new like me to just try to be productive, and I really, really, really appreciate that. And I'd also like to thank the city staff for their meetings and their tireless effort to make Lake Forest a special place, and I'll do the best job I can. Thanks.
Well, welcome aboard, and we know you will do a fine job. Next item of business is opportunity for citizens to address the council on non-agenda items. Seeing none, we go to the omnibus vote consideration. There are 6 items this evening. Approval of the schedule of regular meetings of the council for fiscal year 2019. Approval of a resolution of appreciation for retiring members of boards and commissions. Andrew Logan from Audit, Peter Dunn from Building Review Board, Sarah Lamphere from Gorton, Paul Walker from Parks and Recreation, Jim Cowie and Scott Helton from the Public Service Award Commission, and Senior Resources Commissions, James Bland and Kathy Ottensmeyer. Approval of a proclamation marking May as National Historic Preservation Month. Number 4, approval of awarding a contract with Brandstorm for community marketing plan continuation in fiscal year 2019. Request of the City Council to approve and waive the bid process and award of contract for the architectural plans for the registration of fitness offices relocation project at the Lake Forest Recreation Department. and authorization for the city manager to enter into an agreement with William Shellhaus Media Services LLC in an amount not to exceed $30,550 for professional services related to the operation of the city's public, educational, and government access cable services. As done before, if anyone would like to remove any of these items for separate consideration, please so state. Any particular questions or comments on any of these? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the omnibus agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. There being no ordinances, new business, or additional items for council discussion, I will ask for a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second. Meeting is adjourned.
What's that? You done good, kid.